Hi. So, I used to read this sheet to all families in November, right after their child's lesson. Uh, I like this way a lot better. Number one, it doesn't waste any lesson time. And number two, you won't look at me guiltily when it's something that you feel guilty about me reading, or you won't think if I catch your eye that, oh, she's catching my eye because this applies to me. You'll know that these are things everyone struggles with, and not to take any of my little extra comments or side stories personally. Plus, the other reason is I'm not rushed. I can take my time reading these. I'm not worried I'm going to be late to the next house. So it's a great way to do it. If you end up not wanting to do it this way, I am happy to read it during your child's lesson, but those are the three reasons why I'm really glad to do it this way. All right, so there weren't many revisions on the term letter this term. Everything's pretty much stayed the same. I've had a very similar term letter since we went virtual. All right, it says, Dear families, during the past 18 months, there have been large changes to the world around us. Everyone is under a tremendous amount of pressure. Following these rules will help make piano predictable and fun. Piano should not be something that adds negative pressure to your child's life. A good routine with practice, listening to the CD, and watching your child's lesson will help you and your child have a wonderful upcoming term. Please read these rules prior to each term so we can have the most successful term possible. If you have any questions about them, feel free to ask me at any time, via email or by calling or texting at any time. There are many advantages to giving your child a piano education. It's been shown to improve spelling, reading, and math scores, increase brain activity, and Suzuki piano specifically has been shown to increase auditory processing. Additionally, piano is something that your child will be able to do throughout their entire lifetime. There's a lot of things that your child does now that they won't be able to do throughout their whole life. I mean, not many adults, some do, but not many adults play on football teams. So it's important that your child has activities that they can carry with them throughout their entire life. All right, I ask that all families pay per term. The terms are November through February, March through June, and July through October. It makes it easier for me. I have around 120 students, so it makes it easier for me payment-wise. It makes it easier for you payment-wise. And it makes it less tempting to quit after you had one bad lesson, or to be frustrated if you, your kid is having a hard time. It kind of makes you wait and see how you really feel and then make a choice. There are 11 lessons each term. So hybrid students receive 4 in-person lessons, as long as I don't break my back again. Really hope that doesn't happen. 4 in-person lessons and 7 virtual lessons. Virtual-only students receive 11 lessons remotely. The dates are on Facebook already. They're on the registration page that you use to get here, so you know where that is. And they will be texted to you, or have already been texted to you now. All right. So I understand if you forget whether there's lessons or not. I just feel bad when people text me and I'm, say, on an airplane and there are no lessons and I can't answer, and then I land and I feel really bad, like, oh, you were waiting around for lessons. So my advice to you is take a picture of the lesson calendar, or put it in your calendar right now if you're that kind of organized person. I'm not. I would do the picture thing. Or, I don't get upset at you for texting me. I just end up feeling guilty. So I'm just trying to prevent that from happening. Tuition is due before the first lesson of each term. There's a $25 late fee for tuition paid after the due date. So registration's due now. Tuition you can pay now if it's easier for you, anytime from now until the first lesson of that term. I do ask, and if you've gotten this far in the registration process, if you are up in the air about having lessons, please don't fill out the registration until you've decided. Wait, make a real decision whether you want to continue lessons or stop lessons, and then only fill out the registration if you plan on continuing. That's just because of scheduling issues. If you aren't continuing, you won't be in my schedule, and if you change your mind at the last minute, it throws off my schedule. All right, so there's a $25 late fee if you pay after the due date For Book 1 students, the lessons are 30 minutes long. Book 1 students are welcome to have longer lessons. If you're interested in that, let me know. It does really help. Right now, I have a very limited availability as to whether I can lengthen lessons or not. So if that's something you're interested in the future, let me know. But for Book 1 students, the 30-minute lesson, the cost is $270 for hybrid or $240 for remote only. For Book 2 and 3 students, their lessons are 45 minutes, and that's because we spend time doing scales and sight reading in Book 2 and up. Those lessons are $344 for hybrid or $307.50 for fully remote. For students in Book 4 and 5, they have a 1-hour lesson. That's because we do sight reading and because the songs are long. Some of the songs in Book 4 and 5 are 12 to 16 pages long. So if I ask a student to play a 12-page song and they only have a 30-minute lesson or a 45-minute lesson even, that uses up like half their lesson playing one song. So those lessons cost $418 for hybrid or $375 for fully remote. If you have a student who's in Book 6 or 7 and is in high school, like later high school, older high school, they can elect to have an 80-minute lesson. And that includes 60 minutes at the piano and 20 minutes completely away from the piano, just doing bookwork on music theory. That's more for students who are interested in going into music or kids who really like math and are curious about the why of music theory. So those lessons would be $557 for hybrid or $500 for remote. If you have a child that's 1 or 2 years old, they can take a 7-minute lesson. The cost of that is $67.50 for hybrid or $60 for remote. Students 2 or 3 years old can take 14-minute lessons at $135 hybrid and $120 remote. When you have a kid in that kind of in-between age where you don't know whether to have a 7 or 14-minute lesson, feel free to ask me. I can make recommendations. I usually have a pretty good feel as to when kids get antsy and what lesson length is best for them. Students ages 3 and 4 can take a 21-minute lesson at $202.50 hybrid or $180 remote. Sometimes I have students start at a shorter lesson, just especially remote. It takes a lot of focus out of a kid. We get a lot done in a very short time. It's okay to have a shorter lesson, especially with a supportive parent who pays attention and then practices properly with them. If you miss a lesson, you will be refunded. You just remind me at the end of the term that you need some refunds, and I will check my records. You can be refunded up to 3 lessons per year in the form of a discount on the next payment. If you cancel a lesson, say Monday you text me and cancel your Wednesday lesson, you can't text me Tuesday and say, oh, just kidding, I want my lesson. You can ask. You can always ask. But I might have, already made other plans. Sometimes if it's a day that I teach really late, I'll ask my latest family if they want to go earlier. I have a family that has a 3-year-old going at 9:15 at night. So I might have already switched stuff up. But you can always ask. You can always say, oh, hey, our game got canceled. Or you can tell me, hey, this game might be canceled. And then I might, will be more likely to leave the time open. All right, there's a number of free events in the studio every year. It's up to you to read the newsletter. Yes, please read the newsletter. I talk about a lot of really important stuff in there. I talk about issues that you might be facing. I talk about free upcoming events. I talk about lots of fun things that are coming up. I don't want your child to miss out. And I also don't like wasting lesson time talking about events. We have a lot of events in the studio. I could probably use up 5 minutes of every kid's lesson talking about events. So it really is up to you to read the newsletter. Sometimes I try to keep a lot of events free. Lately I've had an issue with people canceling at the last minute after I've already bought materials. I know life happens. So to kind of make sure that I'm not losing out, I've been charging $2 or $5 or just a little bit so that if you end up not showing up, I'm not completely left with these materials that I've paid for and out the money. That's really not because I want to charge for it. It's really just to ensure that people cancel or I end up with the money for the materials. All right. The enrollment fee is $50. Right now, I'm not accepting any new students. This might change, but I don't think it will. However, I will make exceptions for siblings of current students, especially if they're starting young and they have really short lessons. And I already know the parent is supportive and going to practice with them, and they're going to listen to the CD. So if you do have a younger sibling of a current student, please let me know that they're interested. Even let me know, like, oh, hey, they might be interested next term, just so that I can mentally schedule and plan that. As regular time at the piano is absolutely imperative for progress, any student who misses 2 months or more will be treated as a new student and have to pay the re-enrollment fee. A lot of times I would have, when I was a new teacher first starting out, I would have parents say, oh, we're just going to take the summer off. And then their kids would be so far behind, and the parents would be really frustrated, and they would be frustrated at me, like, why isn't my kid moving ahead? And it would be December or January before the time the kids caught up. It just doesn't work. It's not something you can take a long time off from. So this is just to encourage people to stick with it. I would not probably be able to re-enroll a student who took time off unless there were extenuating circumstances. All right, so lesson etiquette. Parents and guardians must attend all lessons with their child. Exceptions can be made for extreme circumstances, with the note that if you do miss your child's lesson, I will end their lesson a few minutes early to send you a text saying what we went over right then. So this is different from their assignment. This is just me immediately letting you know how they did. This is, what happened, how it went. Here's a video to help. It's different from their assignment sheet. All right, so during lessons, you can take notes, you can take videos. My mom videoed all my lessons, the whole thing, not just the end, just the whole thing. So you're welcome to do that. You're welcome to take your own notes. You're welcome to ask me questions. It's really important that you talk to me directly. So if you're directing your child during the lesson, your child can end up confused. And I know parents mean very well when they're doing this and they're trying to show that they're focused on the lesson. But if you're telling your child, finger three, and I'm trying to tell your child something else, it can really mix up your kid. The best example I can think of this is your child is struggling to remember to play the notes, what note to play and what finger to play, and they're struggling, and then the parent says, sit up straight, and that breaks their concentration. So if it's not something I'm bringing up, it's probably not important for them for that moment. I'm not saying it's not important at all. I just mean for that moment, it's probably not important. This especially applies to virtual lessons. It's extra important that you follow my direction and participate. And you help the child when you're asked. So I might say, hey, parent, can you help them find a C? Or can you help them get out their thumb? So that's important. And it's important for you to be right there watching. So when I say, hey, can you point to a C? You can point to a C, and you're demonstrating there to your child that you're engaged and you're focused, even if you're not talking, that you're really focused on the lesson and that what I'm saying is important to you. And your child will emulate that. They will realize, oh, this is important. Children pick up a lot of nonverbal cues and verbal cues, whether you want them to or not. It's my responsibility to teach you and your child, and your responsibility to encourage them to love the piano. I go over many things very quickly, and it's impossible for me to sum up all the work that we've done in a few seconds at the end of the lesson. So even for parents who are musicians, I have a bunch of parents who either went to school for music or are musicians now, and they realize it's important for them to watch the whole lesson, because I might use a different word than they would use. And that word might be what triggers their child to remember what they're doing versus not. So we do a ton of work during lessons, and it's really important that you watch the whole lesson and not just watch the end or just watch bits and pieces. All right. If you are going to be absent, please provide me with the information of the adult with them, like phone number, who the person is. Let me know how the child practiced during the week. Sometimes when the parent isn't there, the kid completely falls apart, and I don't know, is the kid upset? Are they anxious? Did they not practice? What should I be working on? I definitely need extra direction if you are not going to be there. So contact information, who the adult is, That's important. How do they practice during the week? What should I expect? How is it going to go? All right. So if you're going to be more than 15 minutes late, let me know. For virtual lessons, if you're going to be more than 5 minutes late, let me know. I will walk away from the computer. I'll go get a snack or something, change the laundry, but I'll stay nearby. So just text me like, oh, hey, we're going to be here in like 10 minutes. Then I'll know to be waiting at the computer for you. For in-person lessons, if you're more than 15 minutes late, I will leave your house. I'll probably go to Tim Hortons, grab some coffee, relax. So let me know if you're going to be more than 15 minutes late for an in-person lesson or more than 5 minutes late for a virtual lesson. If I'm more than 15 minutes late, you are welcome to schedule a makeup. I try to text if I'm more than like 5 minutes late for a virtual lesson because that's much more rare, and I think people get worried more quickly when it's virtual. If it's a in-person lesson, driving, it's wild. I could be up to 15 minutes late. So, if I'm more than 15 minutes late, you're always welcome to just reschedule, no penalty. All right. So, if weather's an issue on an in-person day, we'll switch to virtual and reschedule the in-person lesson. If there's no electricity for either of us, there's no lessons. I tried to do a lesson in the dark once. It lasted like 5 minutes before we called it and gave up. Yeah. That was in the old in-person days. All right. There are to be no distraction during lessons. This is a really big one, especially for virtual lessons. You have to be constantly vigilant that your child's in an atmosphere which is conducive for learning. If your child's in an environment where they cannot learn, they will not receive a lesson. That means yelling, other siblings yelling, other parents yelling. It's just really hard to focus when there's a lot of things going on. The TV on in another room, the radio on in another room, a cat attacking, like right here. There's a lot of different things that can happen during a lesson that distracts a child, and it's really just not fair to expect a child to behave and focus when they're not in an environment that's ready for them. Please have your child ready at their lesson time. I know it's a wild summer. There were some issues with that. I totally understand. I do not want to sound judgy. I'm just giving out good reminders here. This includes the child being properly dressed and fed. By properly dressed, I just mean ready for the lesson. If they want to have a lesson in a t-shirt, that's fine. I just mean that they're not going to say, I'm cold, I'm hot, as soon as they get started. State of a mind that allows them to focus on their lesson. They should have a pen and pencil and their Suzuki books by the piano. They should have a metronome by the piano if they're in book 2 and up. A standalone metronome is really the best way to go. Using a tablet or a phone as a metronome can get really distracting. So I really recommend that my students in books 2 and up have a standalone metronome, and all students should have a pen and pencil by the piano, even if they're not sight reading yet or not reading notes yet. It's just a really good habit to get in. If your child ever is tired, sick, unfocused, hungry, or any other distraction, I may choose to give them a shorter lesson or no lesson at all if it's clear they're unable to focus on the piano. It happens. It's better, I have learned in these years of teaching, it is better to just end the lesson and try again next week than to force a miserable kid to play piano. Because then what they'll remember is that miserableness, and then they're more likely to be miserable the next week. Whereas if we just say, hey, we'll try again, no big deal, they're usually starting out, they'll be okay the next week. And if they're not, then there's a bigger issue going on, and then we'll work on the issue. If it happens, you can make up the rest of the lesson, if I have time, another time. For in-person lessons, if your child has a communicable illness, please cancel. We all know the drill now. If I get a cold, I have to go get a COVID test. I have to wait till my COVID test is negative. I have to reschedule in-person lessons. So if your child has a cold, just switch to virtual for that day. It's no big deal. It's one lesson versus me having to get sick and miss a bunch of lessons. So please just be good about that. If you have any questions, that counts as lesson time. So just let me know at the beginning of lesson that you might have a question. I know sometimes it's just, you just happen to remember as I'm trying to hang up, and that's okay. But we can always continue the discussion on text or at the next lesson. This doesn't really apply anymore because everybody switched to online payment, but if you are paying me in person for whatever reason, make sure that that's ready at the beginning of lesson. Or, and this applies to virtual more, if you have payment questions like, hey, what's your Venmo or whatever, make sure that you ask those at the beginning of lesson and not when I'm trying to hang up to get on to the next lesson. All right, so parents are asked to play the correct Suzuki CD at least 30 minutes on average per day. My teacher asked for 2 hours. So 30 minutes is really a more modern take on the proper amount to listen. Ideally, it is still 2 hours, but a modern family isn't able to listen for 2 hours because we are busy, busy people. So 30 minutes, aim for at least 30 minutes on average a day. Any extra is great. Is the responsibility of the parent alone. Even for teenagers, it's always the parent's job and always will be to put on the CD. That's just the easiest way to do it. It's one of many ways to show your child how important their music education is to you. Children need to be seated correctly. The goal is to have a footrest and an adjustable chair. Children need to be seated at an acoustic piano. By the year 2024, I will require all students in Lift School of Music to have a good acoustic piano. I think almost everybody does, but if you have a keyboard, just be aware that by 2024, you'll either have to find a new teacher or get an acoustic piano. I'm giving everybody plenty of time. I announced this at the beginning of this year. You guys have plenty of time to figure it out. Practicing on a keyboard or a broken piano can be exceptionally frustrating for a child, and it'll end in them feeling discouraged. Sitting incorrectly at the piano could be dangerous and result in finger and hand damage. Okay, so I always liken it to playing golf with plastic clubs. If you were playing golf with plastic clubs with people who had regular clubs, you'd feel frustrated. A keyboard is like playing golf with plastic clubs, or trying to ski with toy skis, or snowboard. That's a good one too, because there are people who do try to snowboard with toy snowboards at like Holiday Valley. It doesn't go well for them. All right, at minimum, parents must sit with their child and practice their full assignment. So that's usually 10 to 20 minutes in book 1, and maybe a little more in book 2, and then in book 3 it starts to get to be more. 4 to 6 times per week. So the assignment is the thing that I text or email you after every lesson. The goal is that you practice that whole thing 4 to 6 times per week. Students who are unable to practice alone but still try to practice alone are solidifying bad habits. So it's actually worse for a kid to practice wrong than for a kid to not practice at all. So I always think about the soccer analogy. The way I kick soccer balls is I lean back and kick. And I could practice that all day for weeks, and I would never get better at soccer. And that's what happens when kids practice incorrectly. So it's better to have a child practice less with you carefully than practice 30 minutes every day without you incorrectly. Even 5 minutes with you every day would be better than 30 minutes without you. Students 12 and older may practice alone, but to enjoy piano, they still need encouragement and attention from a parent. There's no substitute for interest and support from the parent and guardian. Honestly, right now, it really is, just because teens are feeling so isolated with the pandemic, it really is just better, even if you're just sitting with your child and supporting them, to sit with them when they practice. There's an article in the newsletter about that, and I think it's important. They need to feel supported right now. This is a really hard time to be a teen. If your child is studying piano seriously, like they want to go in piano in college, you're expected to practice with your child 20 to 40 minutes a day, 6 to 7 days a week, and listen to the CD 2 to 3 hours a day. So that's just recommendations if you are a family that's very serious about piano. All right, we got through the whole thing. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I really appreciate you watching this, and I look forward to a really successful term. Thank you.